This is Sierra Adamson reporting for WeAreChange, and we're here in Fort Meade, right outside the Bradley Manning trial where it's just been read his verdict. I'm here with journalist Kevin Gosztola. Can you tell us what happened and your reaction, please?
What happened was that the judge ended up acquitting Bradley Manning of the aiding the enemy offense. That was the dangerous charge that was getting quite a bit of attention and in the run-up to the verdict. But then we found that she went ahead and found him guilty of multiple Espionage Act charges. And so that was big. And two of those violations involved the Afghan and Iraq war logs, which are big releases that got some attention when WikiLeaks put out all of that information. So now the big focus will be going into the sentencing phase of this trial. He faces a maximum punishment of 136 years in prison. I guess we can be happy that he doesn't face a possibility of being sentenced to life without parole. That was what the aiding the enemy offense carried. But the reality is still that this person is facing the possibility of being in prison for the rest of his life.
What were you expecting coming into this? Did we expect something like this, or did you think that he was going to get put with the aiding the enemy?
Yesterday, I had resigned myself to the fact that he was going to be convicted of aiding the enemy. And I actually saw in the prosecutor's argument just a little nugget that might have held sway over the judge. So the satisfactory reaction that I've had is that I'm somewhat pleased that I can walk away today and know that the judge didn't convict Bradley Manning of aiding the enemy. As an observer who had been reporting on this for the longest time, I have always thought that there wasn't any evidence that Manning had any actual knowledge that he was aiding the enemy when he gave information to WikiLeaks. And we can go through the theories and different arguments that were had about why this was really a novel and unprecedented to be arguing, but I think the focus we should now pivot to is what it means that he's been found guilty of these multiple Espionage Act violations. It's quite serious. I mean, we've had a lot of attention put on Barack Obama as president for prosecuting a record number of people under the Espionage Act. And so now we've got Bradley Manning being the most critical person in his prosecutions of those individuals, because there has been Shammai Leibowitz, a former FBI employee, had actually been forced into pleading guilty to Espionage Act offenses. But this is a full trial. This is a full trial where a judge found that Manning committed multiple violations of the Espionage Act.
What do you think this is going to mean for the United States and whistleblowers going forward?
It sends a message. It definitely does send a message. Anyone in the military who is thinking about revealing classified information, even to their chain of command, I would suggest to you, it's very intimidating, I think, to think that if you are going to find information that shows war crimes, misconduct, abuse, whatever you think you're looking at, or if you're just Bradley Manning, who some of this information maybe doesn't have an obvious crime in it, but it didn't feel right to him. You can argue that maybe the soldiers are following rules of engagement in the collateral murder video, but you can also argue that those soldiers are begging for the order, begging their commander for an order to fire upon innocent, wounded men who are crawling on the sidewalk and requesting and urging that they are able to be given a weapon, given that opportunity where that person will reach out and grab the weapon so that they can fire upon him and just blow him to smithereens. So in this case, I think the focus really is how anyone who's in the military now realizes that if they do what Bradley Manning did, they could go to jail for life, and then what it means for other whistleblowers, and what it means for being prosecuted and then convicted of Espionage Act violations. Like, how will this influence what people think about Bradley Manning? Okay, we no longer can call him a traitor. It's actually very outlandish to call him a traitor now because he did not get convicted of aiding the enemy. But now we have this real situation of him being prosecuted as if he was a spy under the Espionage Act, and there's no evidence of that either. And so going forward here, I think there's still an open-ended question about how people are going to view him. I'm very interested in the people who were very rabid opponents of Bradley Manning and how they come to grasp with this. I'm sure there is a section of the population that really wanted him to be convicted of aiding the enemy. And how do they come to understand what Bradley Manning did?
You've been covering this pretty much since the beginning. Have you seen any change in public opinion of Bradley Manning since it happened to now?
Unfortunately, he was used as like a foil, because when Edward Snowden did the whistleblowing on the top secret surveillance programs from within the NSA, what happened is people were looking at Bradley Manning and they were saying, Edward Snowden's no Bradley Manning. He did this, he did that. They were running down the long list of different reasons why they thought Edward Snowden was different, and maybe people were, he was deserving of much more support than Bradley Manning. And unfortunately, Edward Snowden didn't adopt that. That's not a view that he adopted. He was very supportive of Bradley Manning in his comments and saying that Bradley Manning inspired him to make the decision to actually flee the United States, to not be in the position where he would be imprisoned and held in solitary confinement for 9 months like Bradley Manning was. And so I think that maybe to some extent with the NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden, there might be a little bit of change in the way people view Bradley Manning, but there also has been this incredible lack of attention from media on this case. So I also question whether the American people have been able to actually form a view. How much do they actually know to form a view? How many people can I actually go up to on the street and have a conversation about Bradley Manning? How many people are going to tell me who is Bradley Manning? And I'm going to have to remind them that this is the soldier who released classified information that revealed war crimes, misconduct, abuse, and other things when he provided it to WikiLeaks.
Is there anything else that you'd like to say about all this?
The one thing I want to say is that there are many different U.S. media outlets that are just here for the verdict, and they've just been here for the closing argument. They've just been here for opening argument. There are a small core group of media that definitely continue to deserve recognition. I'm going to recognize them right now in front of you. I've been one of them. Associated Press's David Dishnu has been here. We've had Alexa O'Brien, an independent journalist who did some incredible work during the pretrial period, making sure there was a record that people could look at. We've had Nathan Fuller of the Bradley Manning Support Network doing coverage as a reporter. And we've also had Adam Klasfeld of Courthouse News being here as a core group. And then there was the WikiLeaks truck person, the courtroom sketch artist, Clark Stokely, who did some incredible drawings. And those are the core people. These are the people here who have been here ever since December 2011, coming here regularly. And then there were other press that came in and out. And I think, one of the things that I've really hit at is making sure that the New York Times got themselves here to cover this trial. People don't understand that when the New York Times enters this facility and starts to report on Bradley Manning, there are many different outlets that start paying attention. But when the New York Times leaves, there are many outlets that decide that this isn't important to pay attention. And so I think that's why I was really adamant about getting them there. Though I might have a personal view about my coverage being a little bit better, just a little bit better than whoever they send to cover for the New York Times, I recognize that they have a wider audience than Fire Dog Lake. And so I wanted them to be here, and I pushed through Margaret Sullivan, the public editor, to get some corrections to their coverage because they had not done a very good job when they were here covering the defense's closing argument. And I think people should just really keep in mind that there are a lot of media here that just felt like they didn't have to cover the whole entire trial. And I think people lost out on that feeling. I mean, this was it's not a great moment, but it's an incredible moment in American history with this biggest military justice case ever. And we should have had a George Zimmerman moment. We should have had this moment where we were seeing wall-to-wall coverage periodically throughout the trial, where people were really talking about it. We should have been giving it the treatment of Snowden fleeing China in some way, but nobody really bothered to give it that kind of attention that it deserved.
Do you think there's a certain reason behind that?
I think the media looks at it, and I think it's a selling thing. I think it's also, what do the public actually know about it? It's what more do we have to report here? How much of this is actually going to be interesting? And I think that's just, that's laziness. I think that there is a culture to some of the reporters here of just being disinterested in what this trial has to do. There is this view you could take of them being corporate media outlets, and maybe they're just stenographers for power and they don't want to cover the national security state critically. But I actually think it's more basic. I actually think what is disappointing is that it is very much just about being lazy and not wanting to get here and cover the trial. And again, that's why I praise the adamant core group that I've come to know, who have become sort of great colleagues of mine, who have been here every single day, making sure that people around the world, not just here in the United States, but all over the world, in Australia or the United Kingdom, everywhere, get to cover it. And so people know exactly how the government is trying to put Manning in prison for life.
Thank you. Thank you so much.